A trader came to me once, not a beginner. He had been at this for 2 years, had gone through courses, read books, spent hundreds of hours on charts. His analysis was genuinely good. When he explained a setup, it made sense. When he identified structure, he was usually right. But his account told a completely different story. One day he sent me a screenshot. A trade he was holding. The entry was clean, the setup had logic behind it, but price had moved against him. I asked him where his stop loss was. He said he had adjusted it. I asked when. He said when price got close to his original level. He was not managing the trade. He was managing his ego. And that is what this entire video is about. Because here is the thing most trading content will never tell you directly. The reason most traders lose consistently has very little to do with their analysis. It has almost everything to do with what happens in their mind the moment the market disagrees with them. That one moment, that psychological fork in the road, is where accounts get destroyed. Not over weeks. Sometimes in a single session. So let us talk about what is actually happening inside a trader's mind when a trade goes wrong. And more importantly, why the natural human response to that moment is almost perfectly designed to make things worse. The human brain loves certainty. This is not a trading observation. This is neuroscience. The brain is a prediction machine. It is constantly building models of the world, making predictions, and then checking if reality matches those predictions. When reality matches, the brain releases dopamine. When reality does not match, the brain triggers something closer to a threat response. Now apply that to trading. You look at the chart. You identify structure. You see a liquidity level. You notice a fair value gap. You build a case. And then you place the trade. In that moment, your brain has made a prediction. And it has attached your identity to that prediction. Because you did not just press a button. You made a judgment call. You used your skill. You applied your knowledge. And now the market is about to either confirm or challenge that judgment. When price moves in your favor, everything feels right. When price moves against you, something much more interesting happens. The brain does not just register a loss. It registers a threat to your self-image. Because if the trade is wrong, maybe the analysis was wrong. And if the analysis was wrong, maybe the skill is not as developed as you believed. And if the skill is questionable, then who exactly are you in this game? That is where ego enters, and that is where rational decision-making exits. What follows is a set of behaviors that every struggling trader will recognize. The stop loss gets moved a little further away. The reasoning behind the trade suddenly shifts. Where it was a technical setup before, now there are fundamental reasons to hold. The time frame gets switched. The trader drops from a 1-hour chart to a 15-minute chart looking for any sign of hope. Patience gets used as an excuse to avoid closing the position. None of these behaviors feel like ego defense in the moment. They feel logical. They feel like good trading. They feel like not giving up too soon. But what is actually happening is the brain is doing everything in its power to avoid a conclusion. That conclusion being, I was wrong. And here is what makes this so destructive. Being wrong about a trade is completely normal. It is expected. Even the best traders in the world are wrong regularly. A trader with a 55% win rate is wrong 45 times out of every 100 trades. And they still make money because the losses are controlled. The system works because losses are accepted quickly and moved on from cleanly. But when ego is attached to the outcome, you cannot accept losses quickly. Every loss becomes a referendum on your identity, and the mind will burn the account down before it admits the identity was wrong. Think about what actually happens during a bad trade when a struggling trader holds through it. The original stop loss gets hit mentally, and instead of closing, the position stays open. Price falls further. Now the trader is deeper in loss. The narrative shifts again. Maybe this is now a longer-term trade. Maybe this is a swing position. Maybe the market is just doing one more liquidity sweep before the real move. More time passes. the loss grows. At some point, either the account margin forces a close or the emotional pain becomes unbearable and the position is closed at a devastating loss. And then comes the most telling part of the whole cycle. The trader looks back at the chart hours or days later, and sometimes price did reverse. Sometimes it went back to their entry. And the thought that follows is, I was right, I just held too long. Or, I should have trusted myself more. That conclusion is wrong. And it is dangerous, because it reinforces the exact behavior that caused the problem. It teaches the brain that holding through losses is sometimes the right call, and the next time it happens, the position stays open even longer. This is how accounts do not just take a bad hit. This is how accounts get completely wiped. Now let us talk about the professional side of this, because this is where things get genuinely interesting. A professional trader does not have a better analysis than a struggling trader. Sometimes they do, but that is not the main difference. The main difference is in what a loss means to them. For a struggling trader, a loss means something went wrong with their identity. For a professional, a loss is just data. It is the cost of placing bets in a probabilistic environment. Watch how a professional responds to a trade hitting stop loss. They close it, immediately, without hesitation. There is no extended staring at the chart, no searching for a reason to hold on, no internal debate. The level was hit, the trade is done, move on to the next setup. From the outside, this looks cold. It looks almost robotic. But it is not cold at all. It is the product of a specific belief that took time to build. And that belief is this: a wrong trade does not say anything about me as a person. A wrong trade means the setup did not play out this time. It does not mean the strategy is broken. It does not mean the analysis was stupid. It does not mean the trader is not good enough. It means this particular trade, in this particular market condition, did not work. That is it. When a trader genuinely internalizes this, the psychology of trading changes completely. You can take a loss without your hands shaking. You can close a position without that sick feeling in your stomach. You can move to the next setup with a clear mind instead of a desperate need to recover what was just lost. And that last part matters enormously. Revenge trading, which is one of the most common account killers in retail trading, is entirely driven by ego. The trade closed at a loss, the identity took a hit, and now the brain is in recovery mode. It wants to get the money back immediately. It wants to prove it was not actually wrong. So another trade gets placed, usually without a proper setup, usually at a larger size, usually in a heightened emotional state, and that trade almost always makes things worse. The cycle then continues. More loss, more wounded ego, more desperate trading, more loss. Traders who have blown accounts know this cycle from the inside, and many of them will tell you that the actual moment the account was destroyed was not the first bad trade. It was the second one, placed in anger and desperation right after. So the question becomes, how do you actually separate your identity from your trades? This is not something that happens from reading a single piece of content, but there are specific shifts in perspective that start to change the relationship. The first shift is understanding what a trade actually is. A trade is not a test of your intelligence. It is not a measure of your worth as a trader or as a person. A trade is a hypothesis about probability. You are saying, based on what I can see right now, there is a reasonable chance price will move in this direction. The stop loss is the point at which the hypothesis is proven wrong for this instance. When that level hits, the hypothesis was wrong this time. That is all. Reframing the trade as a hypothesis instead of a judgment removes a layer of personal stakes from the outcome. Scientists have hypotheses that turn out to be wrong all the time. That does not make them bad scientists. It makes them scientists. Testing and being wrong is part of the process. Trading is the same. You form a view, you test it with real money, you find out if it was correct this time. Over enough tests with consistent execution, the edge plays out. but only if each individual test is allowed to conclude naturally, which means hitting the stop loss when the stop loss is hit. The second shift is in how you measure yourself as a trader. Struggling traders measure themselves by trade outcomes. Good trade means good trader. Bad trade means bad trader. This creates a direct line between market behavior, which you cannot control, and your self-assessment, which becomes unstable as a result. Professional traders measure themselves by process. Did I follow my plan? Was the entry taken at the right level? Was the stop loss placed correctly before entry? Was the position sized according to the plan? If yes, then regardless of outcome, the trader performed well. The trade losing does not change that. The market can do anything. What you can control is whether your behavior matched your system. When you shift from outcome-based self-assessment to process-based self-assessment, a loss stops being a personal failure. It becomes a moment where you followed the process and the market moved differently than the probability suggested it might. That is not failure. That is just trading. The third shift is the most difficult one. It requires you to genuinely sit with the discomfort of being wrong without immediately doing something about it. Most traders, when a trade moves against them, feel an urgent need to act, to adjust, to add, to move something, to do anything. That urgency is not analytical. It is emotional. It is the ego trying to regain control. Learning to sit with that discomfort and do nothing is one of the most valuable skills in trading. Because very often, the right action is to let price hit your stop and close cleanly. But that requires tolerating the discomfort of watching price move against you without reacting. And that is genuinely hard. It becomes easier when you have internalized the earlier two shifts, when the loss is a hypothesis result and not a personal judgment, and when your self-worth as a trader is tied to process and not outcome, then watching price approach your stop is not a threat. It is just information. Now, there is something worth addressing directly here. Some people will watch this and think, okay, so I just need to be more disciplined. I need more willpower. I need to force myself to follow the rules. That approach rarely works long-term. Willpower is a limited resource. Forcing yourself against your own psychology creates internal conflict, and internal conflict is exhausting. Traders who try to white-knuckle their way through discipline usually burn out or find the cracks appearing under pressure. The real change is not in discipline. It is in belief. When you actually believe that a loss is not a reflection of your worth, you do not need to force yourself to take it. It becomes natural. The resistance disappears because there is nothing left to defend. The ego is no longer on the line when the stop gets hit. Building that belief takes time. It takes a lot of trades, a lot of journaling, a lot of honest self-examination. But the traders who get there describe it as a specific kind of freedom. Not the freedom from losses, because losses always happen. The freedom from the emotional weight that used to come with every loss. The ability to close a bad trade, note it in the journal, and genuinely move forward without carrying it into the next session. That is emotional freedom in trading. And it is built on one foundational idea. A wrong trade does not equal a wrong person. You can have a losing day and still be a good trader. You can have a bad week and still have a solid strategy. You can lose on a setup that looked perfect and still have your analytical ability fully intact. The market is a probabilistic environment. Even high probability setups fail. That is not a flaw in the system. That is how probability works. The trader who understands this does not chase perfection. They chase consistency. They know that their edge plays out over a series of trades, not in any single trade. So each individual trade carries less weight. Each loss is one data point in a much longer sample. And data points do not shake your identity. The trader I mentioned at the beginning of this video, the one who kept adjusting his stop loss, eventually had to blow a significant portion of his account before something shifted. Not because he lacked knowledge, he had plenty. Not because his strategy was flawed, it was workable. What shifted was his relationship with being wrong. He started to separate what the trade said from what it said about him. And slowly, the adjustments stopped. The stops held. The losses got smaller. The process got cleaner. He is not a superstar trader now. He is something more valuable. He is a consistent one. That is what this game eventually teaches you if you stay long enough and stay honest enough. The market is not the obstacle. You are. Not because you are not smart enough, or not analytical enough, or not disciplined enough, but because the natural human response to uncertainty and loss is exactly the wrong response for trading. The moment you recognize that, the moment you see that your ego is protecting you from the one thing you actually need, which is the clean acceptance of being wrong, everything starts to change. Not overnight. But it starts.